We're very pleased to be joined by a longtime friend of this program, the United States Senator who represents the great state of Wisconsin, Ron Johnson. Ron, good to be able to stand here face to face and join you today in Washington.
Likewise, it's better than over the phone. Good morning.
Sure is. It's good to have you here, Ron. And as you and I are visiting here in the Russell Rotunda, the Senate Armed Services Committee is holding hearings trying to understand more about the threat of ISIS. What do you think is going to come as a result of today's hearing?
Well, hopefully more information, because we need more information. If we're going to, and Congress, we should weigh in on this. We should authorize the use of force, but we need more information. We had Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Brett McGurk in front of Foreign Relations in end of July, and I asked him point blank, can you describe how ISIS represents a threat to America? And he was pretty clear about it. ISIS is funneling 30 to 50 suicide bombers into Iraq every month. They're recruiting effectively off the internet. That same week, an Australian and German suicide bomber blew themselves up in Baghdad. And of course, we've witnessed the first American suicide bomber in Syria traveled back to Florida before he traveled back to Syria to blow himself up. So what Mr. McGurk was saying is it wouldn't be much of a stretch to think that ISIS could funnel those jihadists that have Western passports back into the West, back in America. This is a real clear and present danger, JD, that we need to address.
And as we take a look at the reports coming from the state I used to represent here in Washington, Arizona, the Yuma sector, you have the situation where down in San Luis, apparently a letter offering threats on 9/11 hung across the border fence from the Mexican side. So this continues to be a problem. And what's also disturbing, Ron, the fact that the government tried to suppress the information. It was leaked through anonymous leaks that this in fact had happened. Do you think the administration is dealing straight with the American people?
I don't believe this president or this administration is being as forthright as they need to be. I mean, just look at President Obama's speech. He laid out the goal: degrade, ultimately destroy. And the tail end of his speech, he said, our safety, our security depends on our willingness to do what it takes to defend this nation. But earlier in the speech, as he took certain actions off the table, what he really meant at the very end is do what it takes up to a point, which is quite honestly not showing the kind of commitment to the goal that he himself set. And I think that's one of the reasons, JD, we're having a hard time assembling our coalition partners, because if they don't think the leader is really fully committed to the goal of ultimate destruction, you can see why Turkey just might be a little hesitant when they know that ISIS holds, I've heard reports about 40 Turkish diplomats, also probably next in line for beheading. So if we're going to assemble a coalition of the willing, they need to understand, all those potential coalition partners have to realize that we are fully committed to success and victory and achievement of that goal.
Ron, there has been some stateside criticism of the president saying that, well, first he said didn't have a strategy, and then when push came to shove and he stood up to talk about a strategy, that he may have painted too detailed a picture for our enemies. Is that a valid criticism?
Well, certainly, if you're going to go to destroy an enemy, you don't start taking certain options off the table. You have to make sure that the enemy, as well as our coalition partners, fully understand what it is we're going to do. Listen, I think we need operational security, but what we really need out of this administration right now is a clear articulation of what that goal is and 100% commitment to achieving that goal, and we don't have that yet.
Ron Johnson, we would be remiss if we did not point out the fact a couple of weeks ago you were talking about the president coming to your home state, how you hoped to spend time with him. That didn't come to fruition, and yet an interesting nomination for you. Tell us how the president hopes to have you represent the country internationally.
Well, every time there's a UN General Assembly, the United States has 5 representatives nominated by the president, and it's customary to choose off the Foreign Relations Committee, 1 Republican, 1 Democrat. I was chosen and agreed to do it. And JD, I want to be supportive of this president, because if he succeeds, America stays safe. So I want to do everything I can when we go to the UN. One of my primary objectives would be to talk to Arab states and get them engaged, get their commitment to defend themselves and be fully committed. The model was 1990 Gulf War, when George H.W. Bush assembled this coalition, about 39 partners, and America only paid for 15% of that effort. 85% was paid by other people. There was a real commitment by the Arab states and countries around the world to tamp out that threat that was Saddam Hussein. We need that same type of commitment and coalition partners in this case as well.
And Ron, as you mentioned the funding of what we could call the first Gulf War, it is worth noting that the proportion you talk about in that war is almost reversed when it comes to the UN and exactly who funds the UN, because a whole lot of American tax dollars go into that international body. From your perspective, Senator, is that money well spent?
Not all of it, for sure. And listen, I'm very skeptical of the UN in many cases, but we do need a forum where world leaders can come together and discuss things, because if we can solve these issues diplomatically, we're always better off. I'm not into rushing into war. I have no bloodlust in my heart. We do need to utilize diplomacy. The UN is far from perfect. I'm not 100% supportive of all the money we funnel into it, but we do need a forum, and the UN's there, so I want to use it as effectively as possible.
Now, you were telling me before we came on camera, when news was announced of your appointment, there was a little confusion. Is there something we need to clear up for folks at home?
Yeah, people thought I was joining the Obama administration, giving up my Senate seat. That is not the case. This is in addition. This is an expansion of my role as in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. This is a temporary role. It's an honor, and it's a role I want to use to highlight the abuse of women in the world and get the Arab states to be full, complete partners in this effort.
Well, that is a formidable challenge in the international arena. Let's bring it back here home. And one of the reasons you were motivated to run for the Senate with your business background was try to bring some fiscal sanity to Washington, D.C. Before you got here, that Obamacare vote and all the economic hardship that portends for the nation. You're back in court against Obamacare. Update us on your court case.
Well, again, my lawsuit is just to overturn that OPM ruling that granted special treatment to members of Congress and their staff. President Obama has no legal authority to do that. So even the judge initially dismissing our case on the legal technicality of standing talked about how incredibly important our case was. He said that if we vest all powers in a few, legislative, executive, legal, or judiciary, that's the definition of tyranny. So we're going to appeal this to the Seventh Circuit. Our lead attorney is Paul Clement, ex-Solicitor General of the United States. He argued in front of the Supreme Court against Obamacare. So we've got a crack legal team. We think we should be able to obtain standing so we can have the merits of my case heard in court. And it's really about presidential overreach, the abuse of his executive authority.
Now, another development today we understand, where Chris Smith on the House side is saying, whoa, wait a minute. With Obamacare in at least 5 states, the new health care is in violation of the legislation that guaranteed at least 2 choices of insurance providers not offering abortion. And apparently, at least in 5 states, that's out the window. Again, you went in very narrowly on constitutional grounds, but a lot of people are concerned about in terms of having Congress and government employees escape Obamacare, so to speak. But the broader criticisms of Obamacare, if you had to rank the problems that it engenders, what would be the top 3 concerns you still have about what we call Obamacare?
Sure. It's going to reduce access. As I talk to doctors around the state of Wisconsin, they're quitting. If they're near retirement, they're actually paying bonuses to their children who always wanted to go into medicine, not to go into it because they think it's going to be such an awful profession. Innovation is going to be reduced. The medical device tax is shipping jobs overseas. So quality is going to be lowered, access is going to be lowered, innovation is going to be lowered. Sounds like a great program, huh?
It is
and that's just the tip of the iceberg, JD, and you realize that.
Causing some challenges, to say the least. Ron, the reason I'm back here, the 20th anniversary of the contract with America. And so the class of 1994 on the House side is holding a reunion. I'm interested, as a private citizen back in 1994, what did you think of the goings-on here in Washington and the historic Republican majority after 40 years finally coming to the House?
Listen, I thought that was historic, and the first political event I ever attended was with Newt Gingrich when he had 3 of the contract items. He was talking about Oshkosh in Oshkosh. And so I've got a picture of myself 20-some years ago with what then to become, or soon to become, Speaker Gingrich. So I think that was an excellent concept, a brilliant concept, helped us gain control. And listen, I'm all for running against the harm that Obama and Obamacare is doing to this nation, but we should be showing the American people we're for. I've been pushing for an agenda. May not have a complete agenda. Individual members of Congress and individual candidates have that agenda. They're appealing to their state. I think that's going to work. But then we've got to make sure that we've got a coordinated agenda between House and Senate. Show the American people we can govern. Show the American people what we're for. Show the American people that we will be competent, unlike President Obama and the left.
Ron Johnson, Republican Senator from the great state of Wisconsin, thanks for your time this morning. Let's go back to Newsmax Television South Florida with John and Miranda.
All right, JD, thanks for that. And thanks for that as well, Senator Johnson. We heard him talking about his role appointed by the Obama administration to be a UN envoy. And to clarify, we'll do this again, he is not joining the Obama administration.
Yeah,
just
important to mention that.
Of course, just as his role as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Important hearing going on in the Senate Armed Services committee right now, too. We'll keep our eyes on that. Other stories to get to throughout the day, and we'll check back in with JD from time to time and get the pulse of things in Washington. Great having him up there live in Washington.
Yeah, a lot going on.
Of course, we got a lot more to come here on America's Forum. We want you to stick around with us. And of course, you can always reach out to us. If you have a question you'd like JD to get answered for you while he's up in Washington, you can reach out to us on our social media platforms at Newsmax TV on the Twitter. NewsmaxTV.com is the email address /comment, or find us on Facebook, facebook.com /NewsmaxTV. John Bachman, Miranda Khan, JD Hayworth. We'll be back with you in a few moments.